Thank you very much. We're going to speak about the scientific part of mediumship, which is by itself a challenge. And it's a challenge because not everybody has this scientific vein, and some people are more prone to technical things, some other people are not. So it's a mixed audience. So our codification has some information about it, but later on, after Allan Kardec, one of the books that was published by the Spiritist Brazilian Federation, Spirit André Luiz, and this is the book, The Mechanics of Mediumship. The name says it all. It's going to try to explain how it works. However, this is a book published in the 60s, 1960s or so, where we didn't have knowledge of things that we do today. So he is in the 60s, he was very limited in the vocabulary, in what he could use as a reference, an analogy, or something like this.
Your slides, not sharing.
Okay. They're being shared here. Mm-hmm. All right, just give me a second here. We'll get it done. No? Okay. You see how technical things happen? Imagine André Luiz in the 60s trying to explain mediumship. So again, he was very limited in what he could use as an analogy to explain. If he was probably writing this book today, he would start like more or less like this. As we know from quantum physics, blah, 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 which is not the case. So, and it would be very complicated as well, because not everybody's technical, and it would be as difficult for us to understand as it was for those people in the 60s. So what we're going to try to do here is get everything that he explained in those words, bring to the current times, and use, hopefully, a very simple and light vocabulary so everybody can understand. He based his explanations on electricity, which in those days was still something new, at least part of it, not today. So most of us, we are used to outlets all the time. Everything's electrical today, so it's easier for us today to understand what is said. So here's the analogy. Suppose you're going to charge your laptop computer, for example. So what we have is a charger, what I'm calling a target in this example is a laptop. It could be a smartphone, it could be anything that you need to charge. On the other side, you have the outlet. And this outlet is powered by the central station out on the streets. So that's something that we can easily, hopefully, relate to. Okay, so André Luiz is going to tell us, this is mediumship. Then we look at it and say, how? How come? And he said, but it's exactly the same thing. Okay, so we need to understand, we need to look into this charger. What is this charger? If you open up your charger, if you break the box and you open up, what you're going to see is something like this. Okay, so you have the two connectors, one that goes to the outlet, the other that goes to the target, the laptop. In the middle, you have this, what we call a magnet. So what happens is this. This magnet will transmit, literally, the electricity from the left side to the right side. What we have around these magnets are, on the left side you have a wire, on the right side you have this wire again. Okay, so you see the wires on the left and the right, they never touch. If they did, you would put your finger over here on this connector, you would get a 110 volts. You don't, because they never touch. There's a transmission that uses the magnet for that, okay? So the electrical current comes from out on the street, hits the magnet. When it hits the magnet, it causes what we call the induction effect. It's like it circulates some sort of transmitting capability that goes to the other side, and the other side generates electric current proportional to that one, not the same, proportional. Okay, this is how it works. This is how it works on a charger. Okay, it's not something, hopefully, not very difficult to understand. So now we look at this from the Spiritist point of view. So what we have is a source that is a communicating spirit, a discarnate spirit, and we have a target, which is a medium. Okay, so the guy on the left is going to try to send information to the guy on the right. That's what it is. How is it all sent? The source of information on the discarnate spirit is his thought. He wants to transmit to the medium his thought. So that's the source. That thought generates, just like above, a current, but we can't call electric current because this is not the physical world. André Luiz calls mental current. So the thought generated by the communicating spirit generates this mental current. And this mental current is going to be transposed over to the other side and is going to generate equivalent or proportional mental current that hits the medium. So the thought felt by the medium is a copy. It's like a copy and paste here. It's a copy of the thought of the incarnating spirit. Now, for this to happen, you need a magnet. Where is the magnet? I'm going to show you the magnet. This is the magnet. This is the magnet. The electromagnetic field of the planet Earth, which in several studies, scientific studies, has been proved to be not uniform around the surface of the Earth. It is stronger in some points, it is weaker in other points. It's called anomalies. The magnetic field of the planet has anomalies. That means the medium, the same physical person, the same medium, might have different mediumship capabilities in different parts of the planet. You might be in Brazil, you might be in, I don't know, somewhere in Brazil in great mediumship. When you go to, let's just say, England, it's more difficult or easier. The medium feels that. And why is that? Because of the magnetic field of the planet. So the planet is what makes it happen. If this happens in Venus, it's a different electromagnetic field. So mediumship is not the concept is the same, but the result is not. If you do this in Jupiter, it's a different outcome, although the concept is the same. Okay? So the example that I'm going to take is a situation where the medium looks at the chair and says, there's a spirit sitting here. And everybody else looks and says, there's nothing. And he said, no, but there is, I'm looking at him. And we all say, we are looking at it, there's nothing. So why? How does it happen? So before we get to this, how it happens, we need to understand how the vision works, how the optical system works. Okay? So what we have here is a section of the brain, as you can see. You know, this person is looking towards, you know, the back. And we're going to leave this picture here so we can follow along. So when we look at something, for example, I'm looking at the chair. I can only see the chair because there's light. If we turn off all the lights, I don't see the chair, I don't see any of you, you don't see me, and so and so. So it's all based on light. The light hits the chair and comes into our eyes, in our retinas. The retina is this let's just say ball to make it easier, that has, in simple words, two ends. This is outer, where you have the light coming in, and this is the inner part. What this does, this is called a transducer. A transducer is a device that changes the form of energy. For example, when you take a picture with your cell phone, outside the cell phone is visual, it's light. Inside the cell phone is no longer light, it's electrical pulses. So that device changes the form. That's what the retina does. So on the front of my retina, everything is based on light, visual. At the back of my retina, it's electrical pulses. If we were able to look at the electrical pulses of one of your eyes, we would see a lot of electricity. You can't tell what you're looking at because it's just a bunch of pulses. It doesn't even make any sense. So there is no chair. When the signal gets past the retina, there is no chair anymore. It's electrical pulses that will be conducted through a wire. And throws into the middle of the head. Okay? This middle of the head is called thalamus. What is this thalamus? It's a point of concentration. We have two of those yellow almonds. It's a point of concentration of all the electrical nerves that we have. For example, if you step on my toe, I'm going to scream. Why do I scream? Because I'm going to sense, there's a sensor on my toe that through the spine brings a signal to the thalamus. And that happens for, we have millions and millions of those things. So this signal gets through the optical nerve and goes to this thalamus. And the thalamus, remember, this is all a bunch of cells. We're talking a bunch of cells here. This is material, okay? This is physical. This thalamus has to send these pulses to the part of the brain who is going to interpret and tell me it's a chair that you're looking at. The thalamus does not do that. It's just this concentrator that receives signal and sends signal to where it should be. So it's going to send these signals throughout the brain using neurons. Neurons are brain cells. When you imagine that this is a neuron here, and you get this neuron with this, when you put them all together, it creates a wire that the information passes. Once the information passes, the whole chain of neurons dismantles. And then the neurons are available again to form the next wire per se. That's how it works. And interestingly, I think it's worth mentioning, these neurons, they never touch each other. They get close to each other, but there's no physical touch, which is interesting. And you can see here in this yellow picture, it shows the proximity of them. So this is one neuron, the end of one neuron, this is the beginning of the next. But they don't touch. What happens is the electrical pulse comes through this one here, it hits the end. At the end, we have these, I represent it with these little balls. These are vesicles that have chemical in it. We have 72 of these with chemicals. When the electricity hits that, it will cause these to open up. And the liquid that was inside will leak. It will leak. And it leaks, and it hits the other part that has receptors and senses. Oh, I'm getting signal, but it's chemical signal. It's not electrical anymore. So it gets chemical signals here and transforms back to electricity. It sounds complicated, right? And the electricity goes on to this one, and then another. This is called a synapse. So at the end of this, there's another synapse. It goes to the next one, and so. Why? Could be easier, right? Well, I can't say why, but I can tell you something that is interesting that might give you each one of you a different light to the problem. When I tell you, for example, when I ask you, what is this? Everybody's going to say it's a pen. That's very objective answer. For objective answers, for objective situations, we are responding with the electrical pulse passing through these neurons. And then for the same pen, I ask you, is this small or big? We don't have a straight answer anymore. We have opinions, because each one uses a different reference. So when you have to tell me this, if it's big or small, you are using the synapses. You are responding with chemical substances in the brain. And that's why, if there's an imbalance in the chemicals, which are called neurotransmitters, if there's an imbalance, we might change our perspective on things. What makes it change? Very classic, drinking, for example. When drinking and you wake up next day, I'm going to ask you, why did you get, on the top of the table and started singing? And you're going to say, I didn't do that. Why? Because there was a tremendous alteration in the chemicals, so the perception changed completely. And we can go even further. We change perceptions from day to day. For example, today I might like my blue sweater. Tomorrow, I'm going to dress myself and say, no, not blue. I'm going to use whatever, black. So you see, because my perception when I dress up tomorrow is not the same as when I dressed up this morning. So can you see the number of possibilities? That's called free will. Free will in the brain comes through this. The brain is wired to respond to free will. It's smart enough to respond to free will through chemical signals. Coming back. Then we created this virtual wire to pass the information from the thalamus to its destination. What is the destination? The destination is the area of the brain who is going to interpret this bunch of electrical pulses, which originally was me looking at the chair, but the brain doesn't know that yet. Okay, the process is still taking place. So what happens here is the signal is sent to the cortex. What is the cortex? I don't know if you've seen many times we see pictures, images, and representations of the brain with colors. It's very common. So what are these colors? Why is this colored in the first place? Why do we represent the brain with colors? Because the areas of the brain have different functions. Each one of these colors here has a name, a lobe. So we have 4 lobes in the brain. Each one of them does something different. We are talking about watching and looking at a chair. So it comes through the retina. The signal is going to go to the area of the brain that is responsible for interpreting signal that comes from the retina, which is this here. So it goes to the occipital lobe, which, if you look at the pictures back here, there is no chance at all, 0% chance, that something comes through my retina and it gets sent to the frontal lobe. Why? Because it's wired. The optical nerve is wired. So we know where the information is coming from. The brain knows. So it never gets it wrong. So when it gets to the occipital lobe, the interpretation is going to take place. Now, how come a bunch of cells, these are all cells, we're talking physical here. How come a bunch of cells is going to come back with the answer, it's a chair? By the way, you already know it. It can't. These are cells. So this has to be sent to some sort of intelligence that will come back with the response. That is in the perispirit. It's one level above. Cells cannot make a decision that I'm looking at a chair. It's impossible. They're physical. So the answer comes back from one layer above saying, well, this is a chair, by the way, you already know what this is. And then it gets sent back over here. So now the brain takes control. It knows what it has to do right now. Is this too complicated or more? I'm trying to use the minimum words and technical terms to make sense out of it. Thank you. So this is how the vision works. Okay? So this process here, we're going to divide in 3 parts. First part is when the light hits here and the optical nerve takes the pulses. I'm going to call this the acquisition of the information. There's a second part that, remember, the thalamus doing the distribution of all of this, so I'm going to call the control. The thalamus controls everything. And the third part is the interpretation, what it really means. Okay, enough with the physical. Back to Spiritism. The medium says, there's a guy sitting here. We all say, there is no guy sitting here. Okay, the medium, does he need, when he tells me there's a guy sitting here, does he need to have his eyes open, yes or no? No, by the way, actually, it's easier for him to close his eyes so things don't get confused. So he will close his eyes and say, there's a guy sitting here. When he closes his eyes, this no longer applies, correct? There's no retina to see anything, so this doesn't apply. If this does not apply, this does not apply. There's no signal sent to the thalamus. Nothing was collected through the retina, so this doesn't apply. So how come he tells me there's a guy sitting here? Because he gets the information pre-interpreted into his brain, into his cortex. How is that information getting there? Bypassing the physical parts of the brain. That's mediumship, which comes through the pineal gland of the medium. And it gets sent to the cortex pre-interpreted. The brain doesn't have to make that decision. He's being told, there's a guy sitting here. So all the medium is telling us is repeating what his brain has just processed. There's a guy sitting here. So the signal gets straight into the cortex, pre-interpreted. This is one example of a visual situation, but it works the same for everything else. For, when a medium hears a voice or whatever, it's all the same. We're showing a concept. We're not showing a spotted situation here. So hopefully this makes sense to you, right? So when we look at these phenomena, trying to explain the physicality of mediumship, we need to understand where we are in mediumship, because mediumship could be a million different things, and at times it's not even well defined, especially when you are new to the study of mediumship and spiritism. Sometimes it gets confused. So paranormal phenomena is divided into 2 things. We need to look at this as 2 different things. One of them is what we call animistic. The animistic phenomena does not need a medium. It's something that the person, the incarnated spirit, makes it happen by itself. And it could be an objective situation or subjective. Objective examples for telekinesis, pyrokinesis, when a guy is able to set things on fire without touching them, without a match, does not need a medium. It's just the ability that this medium, this person has to produce the effect. So objective effects means when the thing gets on fire, we all see. It's not his imagination, it's not in his head. We all can see the thing being on fire. Now, there are subjective phenomena also. We are still in animistic phenomenon, which does not require a medium. It's just an incarnate spirit. Subjective examples, telepathy. Psychometry. Psychometry is fantastic. It's the ability that certain mediums have to touch an object and tell a story about it, which is used in several areas, including this country here, for police, for, in search of criminal individuals. So there's an assassination, a murder, and it's hard to get clues about it. So the police will call known and mediums, psychometry mediums or psychometers, which are famous and have produced good results, and put in the hands of that person an object that belonged to the person who was assassinated, and they will put their hands and they'll tell the story. They'll go here and there, and that's where the guy's gonna be. And it's fantastic. So psychometry is a totally separate study because it's a huge study. But it's a form of mediumship, and it does not depend on the medium. Okay, now, the other type of phenomena is the mediumistic phenomena, which is what we've been talking about here. That's the example that we used. Mediumistic media can also be objective and subjective. I'm sorry, physical or intellectual, intelligent. Physical mediumship, examples, apparitions, or materializations, as we call sometimes. Transport, things get moved from one point to another without touch. Direct voice, where there is the medium is not moving any of his vocal cords. It's just a voice that speaks up in the environment. So those are physical effects. We all see those. We all see those. It's not that you see and I don't know. That's not it. It's very objective. And also we have intelligent mediumistic phenomena. Those depend on the medium's cortex, like the ones we saw here. The medium is going to allow his cortex to be used for the phenomena. Here are some examples. Clairvoyance, clairaudience. Clairvoyance is what we did here, right? The example that we took. Clairaudience, psychography, cacophony, and it goes on and on. Those phenomena, all of these things here, depend on the physical brain, on the medium and its cortex. These phenomena do not happen if that's not in place. Now, as we saw in the beginning, right, for the discarnate spirit to be able to produce thoughts and send over, per se, to the medium, we have to have things in place. It's not, well, let's do it. I want to do it now. Let's just get it done. No. There's a lot of things that have to come together for this to take effect. Plus, the possibility that the medium is not as strong or weak in all parts of the planet, which is another interesting thing. So, when we talk about these intelligent mediumistic phenomena, the brain, which is just cells, is being used because of the nervous system of the medium will produce an effect, which could be cacophony, psychography, whatever it is. But the medium doesn't have to have the knowledge of what he's producing. That's why, for example, in the book that we started off with, The Mechanics of Mediumship, a very technical, difficult, challenging book, still today, was produced with the use of a medium's brain of a person who had not even elementary school completed. No knowledge of anything even close to that. That's proof that, there's more than what we can imagine and think of in terms of physical world. So situations like this, mediumship, and what happens inside the medium's brain and what happens in the world, so it takes place. It's something that the book explains. If you want to try to go back to the book, I encourage you. If you walked away once, try it. It's not going to change, if you read the book again or try to, of course, it's not going to change the contents of the book, but you might have a different perspective now, hopefully. Hopefully I was able to, get you excited enough to give it another trial. Okay, so that's what I wanted to bring to you today, and we'll be here. We'll have questions and answers later, so we'll be available for more talk and more information. Thank you very much.